Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics.
We're here to do part 3 of our 4-part review of the MCU. Today we're going to look at the movies that fall within 16 to 9.
Working our way up to the top.
Working our way through the top. We are solidly in the portion where these are all really, really good movies.
I know.
That are tough to enjoy, and I think, as we sat down and kind of went through this, it was really just like a fraction of a difference between the two. Like, we really spent so much time. I think especially in this section here between like 16 and 9, like what didn't make the top, like 7 or 8.
And then we have to sit back sometimes and we surprise ourselves. Is that really at number 12?
Yeah.
Because the movies in this part of the series are just really so good.
Yeah.
And it took quite a bit of deliberation, but of course our tried and true method.
Just if you were sitting at home
Sunday afternoon, there's nothing on TV.
Two of these movies started up.
Yeah.
What are you putting on?
Right.
And again, no critical reviews, no audience scores, no box office.
No box
nothing
office,
like that.
nothing.
Just
two guys who enjoy
purely
comic book movies.
If you were sitting down, what would you watch with your time? Again, though, below put your list where you would have slotted here. Kind of use that method, maybe see what it gets you. But wouldn't blame you at all. Some of these ones that are in 16 through 9 might be way higher for you, or could be even a little bit lower. Because even some of the ones we had in part 2 kind of covered some great ground there. So.
And when we get to
the final part 4.
When we get to part 4, there are several of them that could easily interchange as the top one.
Yep.
But again, this is just our preference, what we like the best.
What we think works.
Yeah.
So to start out this one at 16, we had Avengers Age of Ultron.
The Avengers of Age of Ultron. Now, I really enjoyed this movie for so many reasons. I really liked how it played out. I love the effects, especially of the city coming up out of the air into the air, levitating, and people making those last minute decisions. They're trying to save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just made for a really dramatic finale. And Scarlet Witch.
No, we get Scarlet Witch debuts, Quicksilver debuts, although his debut was quick. Kind of ended very fast.
It did.
And then we had Vision show up as well, which was really cool.
So amazing.
I think one of the things I really loved about this movie, and like I had it a little bit higher, and then we debated it more, and I moved it lower. I love that we had like a scene with the Avengers at that party early on, where they're like trying to lift Thor's hammer and joking around. So it was the first time that you kind of saw them actually interact as like friends, like a team. It really felt like they had bonds and relationships, and that goes a long way with the universe that they have.
And the little part with Black Widow and Bruce Banner.
Yeah, it was
kind of interacting at the bar there, the little flirting going on.
Kind of a different choice, but I think they actually did decently well. They kind of capitalized on that and giving those two characters an arc. Ultron as a villain is probably why it falls to 16, that he was a good villain. I don't know if it was fully realized as like the best version of him that it could be, but he was still a good villain.
I did like the graphic of the AIs.
Like fighting with each other.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I think, again, it just kind of goes into, compared to some of the other ones, why does this one not go as much? There was a little weird, like they stop at the farm in the middle, and that scene took quite a while. So that may be why it scores down a little bit on the list. But overall, a really, really solid movie. I've seen a lot of people kind of like dump on this movie sometimes. And I think it's really just because the other Avengers movies are so good that this kind of goes into 4. But when you really just watch this in isolation, it's actually a really, really good movie.
I know.
That holds up well.
It really does.
So we had that one slotted to 16. 15 for us, we actually had Iron Man 3.
So you can see the dilemma now. When you
you start getting into these ones, it's like, man, these are some good movies.
These are some really good movies. Iron Man 3, awesome movie. And yet it comes in at 13.
15. Yeah.
15.
For Iron Man 3, for me, I think one of the reasons it would fall a little bit lower is the whole fake Mandarin thing, and it didn't really land. I thought it was a clever twist, but it didn't really work fully, especially if you're a comic book fan. Kind of that
you were expecting Mandarin.
Yeah, and especially
not a
that's
fake Mandarin.
It's Tony's biggest villain. This would be like if you went to a Batman movie and you have like it's a fake Joker.
It's not the real Joker. It's an actor paid. A drug-addicted actor who was paid for...
Which the actor, Ben Kingsley, did a good job with that fake out, but...
I know.
It kind of doesn't land as well. final action scene's a little disappointing too, but there's so many cool moments in this movie. When they have the Air Force One kind of has the explosion and Iron Man catches them all before they hit the water's great. I think my favorite scene in the whole movie is when Tony kind of doesn't have the armor and he goes to a hardware store
and makes
his own weapons.
Right. I mean, that is classic.
And I think this was probably Downey's best performance as Iron Man in terms of the comedic stuff. Some of the lines and one-liners and things that he says that he just gets in there so fast in this movie are so funny. And when you rewatch it, it really moves up. It's funny. It's like I really did not like this movie when I saw it in theaters, and then I have watched it probably 20 times since, just catching it on like TV on a Sunday, and it's like, man, that's a really, really good movie. And it's really, really solid. A little bit lower because of the villain, probably why it falls into 15, but a really solid film overall. 14, we had Thor Ragnarok. Mike, I know Thor is your favorite Marvel character. I know we're more DC guys, but Thor's your favorite Marvel character.
I love Thor.
What did you love about Ragnarok?
Ragnarok, I think, was just it was a decent movie. Like we were saying, when it comes to these movies, they're all really good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sitting down on a Sunday and two movies come on,
like which one you picking?
Right. Which one are you picking? Are you picking Iron Man 3? I would go for Ragnarok. But that's just because I love Thor so much, you know?
I think the reason it works so well, the team up between Thor and Hulk really works. Those had kind of been two discarded characters at Marvel in that time, because this is when like Civil War was coming out.
And they really got to show their stuff in that movie.
Yep. You had a great fight scene in the middle with the two of them battling it out.
That was so classic. Like tree trunks were coming down, and you know.
No, and you just have like this huge arena, and then you have great fight scene. Really a very Kirby-esque kind of design on the building that they're fighting in with the Grandmaster and all that. Hela was a great villain in the movie too. I thought they did a really good job of building her in. And I really liked that, even though it's a Thor and Hulk story that's in there, they really did a great job of having Loki work with Thor throughout the film and kind of like utilize that Loki always betrays the thing, but ultimately they're brothers.
You know it's coming. Eventually he's going to stab him in the back.
Yep. I think the only thing I wasn't a huge fan of in this film, they do discard a lot of Thor characters just kind of nonchalantly, like the Warriors 3, which are kind of a big deal in the comics, just get killed off like nothing in the movie. But some really good humor and just some great stuff in the movie.
As far as character development for the Avengers, it really had to be there because of the relationship between Hulk and Thor in the Avengers, story arc, the grand story arc of the Avengers. So very enjoyable.
It's a solid movie, really a lot of fun, and great Stan Lee cameo where he has to cut Thor's hair. I think probably one of Stan Lee's funniest cameos throughout. That was really, really good.
Yeah, it was funny.
And always gets a laugh. Probably 13. The most controversial one we have on here is we have Avengers Endgame at 13. It's like the number one grossing film of all time. Right? I don't know if Avatar ended up passing it again, but like number one grossing film of all time. We don't even have it in the top 10.
How did that happen? And we were scratching our heads. We were like, really? Endgame?
Is Endgame really like
at
13?
Number 13, Endgame. And so we had to go back to our model. Like if it was on TV,
what are you watching?
What are you watching? And so, without spoiling number 12 just yet.
Yeah, I think the big thing is with Endgame, there are some amazing moments. Cap getting the hammer, the final snap that Tony gets. The way that he goes out is great.
It's great, but he goes out.
But yeah, at the end of the day,
it's a heartbreaker, right?
Where this movie does go is there's a little bit of sadness at the end, and I'd say if I'm watching these for
Tony
pure
really
enjoyment,
have to die?
Like you really had to take out Tony, and you had to take out Cap, and Cap kind of goes to the past and stuff like that.
He wanders off to the past, and you're like, no, don't go, Cap.
Yeah, I'd also say it's a bit long. It is 3 hours, and you do feel some of that time at the beginning. Some of the story arcs didn't work as well. The whole Thor being out of shape and like video gaming and that didn't really work. And
not for a Thor fan, it didn't go over
a major
well.
Disservice to him as a character.
Yeah.
The other part I really didn't like, Hulk being like smart all of a sudden. When we've had this as his character arc, and it's like, he's just in between movies. Hulk's now smart and he's figured out the whole Banner. Whole balance, but there are so many good moments in the movie. There's so many cool scenes that it has to be up near the top, even if it's not number one. That all-out war at the end where the portals open and everyone's coming through. Just one of the coolest scenes, and I'll always remember seeing that in the theaters and just seeing like the crowd erupt with excitement and things like that.
Of course, it was awesome.
It was a great moment.
So again, with it coming in at number 13 like, and again, we're talking about all these movies
just
in
a
the
fraction
top 10
of
or
a
15.
difference that could be there.
Just a fraction.
12, we have the first Avengers movie.
So think about it now.
Yeah, both
If
these ones
both
outside
come
of the
on
top
TV
10.
at the same time, and you know if Endgame's going to be 3 hours,
three-ish hours,
three-ish hours, and you know you're going to be sad at the end because, but then there's Avengers, and it's only 2 hours,
2 hours or so,
12 minutes or something, and you're like, you know.
Avengers was just so much fun, and I think that's the only downside of the first Avengers movie is the first maybe 30 minutes are a little boring. But once the team comes together,
once it gets going, it's amazing.
The battle on the helicarrier where they're just all out going, and
so awesome.
You have a little bit of a Thor Hulk fight. You have that fight in the woods with Iron Man versus Thor, and Cap shows up. You get great moments for like Black Widow where she's getting interrogated and she's like, no, like I have this guy exactly where I want him.
Yeah, I got this guy exactly. You're interrupting me while I'm working.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, there were so many iconic
really
scenes.
Well. That whole circle shot of the Avengers assembled together. I mean, that's been used so many times now, but that was just
when you saw it the first
time,
saw it. Oh my God!
And it was really the fulfillment of the promise of the MCU. Like everyone had, what it's going to look like. What's it going to be when these people finally team up? This kind of fully fulfilled it, and it was just a great moment. I'll always remember too the post-credit scene when you see it and then Thanos turns around. As a comic book fan, that was so cool. Like, oh my gosh, they've got like a giant plan actually that's going to happen. So it's a great movie. I think maybe just a little bit lower because of the start being a little boring, and then Hawkeye kind of being brainwashed. The whole film was a bit of a downer up until the end, but still great movie. Easily slotted at 12 for us.
Coming in at number 12.
11 will probably be the most controversial one we had because I've seen a lot of lists and things of this, and I see this movie graded down a lot, even amongst fans of the character. And that's Spider-Man Far From Home, which I know people would probably think we're crazy for putting that above both Avengers and Endgame. But to defend this a bit, I think, one, you have an amazing sequence, probably one of my favorite sequences in any comic book movie in the last 20 years, with that fight between Spider-Man and Mysterio in the middle of the film where he's using the illusion tech.
It was just
so many cool things as a comic book fan where you're like, it almost looks like they're pulling it directly off of panels of some of those classic confrontations.
And the character arc between Peter and MJ. I mean, that thread ran strong through the whole movie, and it's hard to pull that off in an action movie when you've got so much going on, and still it brought you back to where you were like, oh yeah.
It worked, and I think that's a cool thing this does is Spider-Man as a character is so unique in that he's equally important as Peter Parker as he is as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You care equally about his relationship with Flash and Harry Osborn and MJ in the comics. And I think the movies finally kind of captured that with this, where his civilian world, his relationship with MJ, in the movies it's Ned, Betty, the other students, where you really feel that tension of his life kind of almost being pulled away from him and him pushing back.
Yep.
And I thought this just did such a good job of balancing it. I really also thought they just handled Mysterio in general really well. Jake Gyllenhaal played the character really well.
To the T, right?
And I love the way they tied it into the MCU as well. Like I think sometimes folks down on these films because they feel like Spider-Man was too tied into it. But in all honesty, in a world where he knows Iron Man, and he was part of the Avengers, it would make sense that would be part of that arc.
And a lot of people he would never give the glasses away. But in that moment, I mean, I think it was well written to where it was believable.
And it was just, I think the thing is they did such a good job of making Spider-Man a kid that you get it. Like, he probably would be looking for an exit out of this.
Like 16 or 17 at the time.
He just wants to be with his girlfriend. That's something like in the Spider-Man comics, when you really read the early Peter Parker appearances, like he's almost always quitting because I can't get a date with Betty in the first 50 issues, and then it's complicating with Gwen, and then that responsibility part kicks in and he knows he's got to go back. And I thought they did such a good job of balancing it.
They really, really did.
Especially when like MJ finds out he's Spider-Man, and you kind of see that dynamic for the first time that's so prevalent in the
comics. And then
comics.
she pretends like she knew it all along.
Yeah,
I knew it.
Especially because they have them really work together, and you see her really have his back. And I think the movies haven't really done that well thus far, and that's really something that's huge in the comics. And so, just as a Spider-Man fan, really appreciated that. I will always have that movie ranked very, very high. It was very, very good.
Me too.
On there. Number 10, we have Civil War. Captain America: Civil War. Another great film. Gets the debut of this guy, Black Panther, in the movie, which was so memorable. It had some really, really great scenes in that. And I think that was one of those characters when they debut, you know, like, man, that character is just...
Yeah.
You just know that character going forward. Like, every time that character appears, they nailed the costume, the actor, the way he's in the film. Like, you just knew right away, like, that is it. They hit it well.
It was amazing.
You also get Spider-Man showing up for the first time, which was great. He swings and steals the shield.
Brought down the house. It was just so
all-out
cool.
war at the airport, where you've got the two sides fighting each other, and you just get such a cool use of the powers for every character. It was just a well-earned thing, and I think it was something that...
It was a big payoff, too, for the fans.
Yeah.
And I feel like it followed the storyline of the comics pretty well.
The comic books pretty well for Civil War, especially because, like, given where the MCU was, you can't perfectly replicate it. Given that they didn't have the X-Men and Fantastic Four like the comics did, they did the best they could to adapt it.
With the characters that they had.
They really did a good job of giving both Cap and Tony kind of a side where you could pick either one of them. They didn't really make like, okay, Iron Man's 100% the bad guy here.
Yeah.
Or Cap, there was points from both sides.
And it would have been easy to do, and a lesser film would have done that. But not this one.
It's the strength that they did of Captain America as a character too, and that like from the movies, I think Iron Man is by far and away the most popular character that Marvel had, with the most charismatic actor they had, and they risked enough like putting him in direct conflict with the main character of this movie, and I love that they had the guts to do that.
Yeah.
And then you get that final fight scene with Cap and Iron Man underground, where it's just they're recreating panels from the comics. You get those two just all out going at it, and there's just emotional weight to that scene, and it's something where Marvel earned that by the work they had done in the previous movies, building up to that, and it just delivered on it. It was fantastic to see. So we had that at 10.
Number 9.
Last one of part 3.
Number 9.
Iron Man 2. Probably another movie that some folks would have lower. I've seen this one go lower. But overall, I would say this is probably the most rewatchable movie. Not the best movie, but the most rewatchable movie for me in the MCU.
At this point, like it's been, 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And it's got that nostalgia feel to it when you watch it again.
Yep.
You're like, oh my gosh, I remember what I was doing in
2009 or 10 when it came out.
When it came out, and you're like, oh my gosh. And it brings back a lot of that nostalgia for you when you're watching it. And when you realize like everything that's come after, all the movies and everything, this was before all of that.
This was kind of the first building blocks, really, of like, okay, they're really going to go for this. Like Black Widow shows up, War Machine shows up.
Yeah.
You started seeing all that there. That opening scene where he drops down with the AC/DC playing and kind of gives the speech at the Stark Expo. It's such a great opening to a movie.
Yeah.
And then you get that awesome capper at the end with him and War Machine in that like Oracle Dome area of fighting. It's
the whole thing about
great.
Everyone was just kind of waiting when he announced at the end of the first movie that he was Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of dropped the mic moment. And so then we kind of, well, where are they going to go from here? Because, superheroes always have their identity,
That's the staple of the secret identity, yeah.
And it's like, how are they going to play it out? And I think they just played it perfectly, especially with that opening scene.
And it's a great balance of humor. It's a great balance of action. I think I loved the early MCU movies like this because you could just tell the creatives were having a ball making the movie. And they really going for it with every scene, and I thought so cool, and it's just a fun movie. Scarlett Johansson shows up as Black Widow for the first time in this movie, perfectly cast. and just did such a good job. And again, one of those characters that as soon as it shows up, you're like, oh man, that character is going to be around a while. It works. It's perfect.
It was so great.
It's just a great movie.
They were that little sparring scene between him and Black Widow.
Yeah. And they just really nailed pitch perfect that balance of humor, drama, emotion. Tony struggling the whole film with like he's dying and what's he gonna do, and kind of that self-destructive behaviors kicking. And I liked that they did that. I love that they gave him flaws and made it seem like he again could self-destruct instead of just he's a superhero, now everything's perfect. So I always will remember that film, and that's why we have it where we have it at number 9.
Number 9. So it only gets better from here, and more difficult to narrow them down. Yeah.
So part 4 we will have next with the final 8, the top movies in the MCU. But list what you think down below. What do you agree? Do you disagree? Where would you slot these movies yourself on your own list? We'll be back with you in the next video.
Don't miss the next one.
All right, 2 guys and stacks of comics. We'll see you later.